Good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, my group members and I will be presenting on the carbon cycle. My group members are Dharshanie Deoramnauth, Daras Dandas, and myself, Julia Barron. I will now begin our presentation. What is the carbon cycle? Now, the carbon cycle is a biogeochemical cycle, meaning it contains biological, geological, and chemical aspects. The carbon cycle basically involves the exchange of carbon. In other words, it is a process by which carbon travels from the atmosphere into organisms and the earth, then back into the atmosphere. Now, why is the carbon cycle important? So it is important because it maintains the balance of carbon in the atmosphere. It transfers carbon through species from the atmosphere, and it is found in many molecules. For example, carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. I'll now hand you over to my colleague Darshini, who will be looking at the stages.
There are several stages to the carbon cycle. Firstly is the photosynthesis stage. This is where photoautotrophs are constantly removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere by converting it into glucose first through the process of photosynthesis, which is where plants absorb carbon dioxide, to which the plants may convert carbon molecules to make sugars, proteins, and lipids for growth. In addition, chemoautotrophs would use carbon dioxide so as to synthesize organic compounds. The chemical equation for photosynthesis converts carbon dioxide and water with the help of light and chlorophyll in order to produce glucose and oxygen. Then there is the consumption stage. This occurs through the use of food chains and food webs where carbon molecules are consumed by organisms. For example, plants makes oxygen for animals to survive, while when animals die, they decompose and become natural fertilizers for plants. Next is the respiration stage, and this is when autotrophs, heterotrophs, and decomposers require and release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The chemical reaction, which is aerobic respiration, is where glucose and oxygen is converted to form carbon dioxide, water, and adenosine triphosphate. Then there is the excretion and egestion stage. And both lies in the type of waste discharge from an organism, where excretion occurs in both plants and animals, where metabolic wastes are discharged, while in the egestion stage, the undigested food that is left over after digestion is discharged in animals. Then there is the decomposition stage, and this is when dead organic substances are broken down into simpler organic or inorganic carbon compounds by decomposers. For example, bacteria can break down most types of organic matter. Fungi are primary decomposers, which are found in forests, and they break down like fallen trees and woody organisms. And worms are scavengers that hasten bacterial decay by breaking down an organism so as to sorry um, by break sorry worms are scavengers that hasten bacterial decay by breaking an organism down so the nutrients are more available to bacteria. Next we have fossilization stage, and this is where organisms would decay slowly over a period of time, which causes them to be in this one position. Therefore, they are compressed, which in turn forms fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and gas. Lastly, we have the combustion stage, and this involves the burning of fossil fuels that releases carbon dioxide that is stored in the atmosphere. For example, the burning of wood or coal to heat your home and petrol or diesel to run your car would affect the carbon cycle because due to which would give rise to greenhouse gases such as methane, sulfur dioxide, and chlorofluorocarbons. The chemical reaction for combustion includes methane, which converts methane and oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water, and ethane, which converts ethane and oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water. The diagram below basically demonstrates the complete process of the carbon cycle. Now I'll hand you over to Darius.
I'll be looking at how humans and their environment impact the carbon cycle. From what you learned from my colleagues before, we identified the fact that the carbon cycle is controlled by many different organisms, and at different stages, both animals and plants are involved. Now, as humans, due to their activity, they can directly affect these organisms that are involved in this cycle. So, for example, with regards to deforestation, which involves the cutting down of trees and so forth, these trees that are necessary for absorbing the carbon dioxide from the air and using it for the production of different macromolecules, the reduction of forests within the earth will disturb the balance of ecosystems, whereby the stability of carbon in the atmosphere and the stability of carbon in the atmosphere. It is said that some 10 million hectares of forests are cut down each year due to deforestation, as well as man-made fires, as well as climate fires that are caused due to climate change. Next slide. Next slide. Another human activity that directly affects the carbon cycle has to deal with industry. Some 50% of the carbon dioxide that enters the atmosphere actually comes from combustion, from the burn of fossil fuels. 25% stays in the atmosphere, and it is a major contributor to the accumulation of greenhouse gases, which also cause climate change. Now, this climate change can also affect organisms, because droughts may happen, and these droughts may cause plant life to die, and if plant life dies, then carbon dioxide is not as readily removed from the atmosphere. Also, 25% of this carbon dioxide that enters the oceans, and it can cause ocean acidification, change the pH of oceans, and actually destroy the diversity or change the diversity of oceans. Some 80% of our oxygen we actually get from phytoplankton. Now, man, by changing the carbon dioxide levels in the air, changes sea levels, causes heat waves, leads to climate change, and this will affect all organisms involved in the carbon cycle. Now, ways to prevent or ways to stop human environment impact on the carbon cycle. The first one is the reforestation, replanting of trees. The trees that are cut down each year for fossil fuels or for the use of building homes, man can engage in practices where they replant such trees. Also, to decrease the carbon footprint, man can use alternative energy, for example, wind and solar power, and remove themselves from the use of fossil fuel energy, so to decrease the carbon dioxide accumulation in the atmosphere. Also, man can engage in practices of carbon sequestration. Now, this involves storing carbon in particular places. The geologic carbon sequestration has to deal with storing carbon dioxide in underground geological formation. So storing it within bedrock and so forth. And actually, the the EPA, sorry, within America constructs wells to store carbon dioxide that is derived from factories. Also, biologic carbon sequestration, which has to deal with storing carbon in vegetation, soil, woody products, and so forth. So examples of this would include different agricultural practices which involve um, mixed grazing or not overgrazing so that plants have a chance to grow and that carbon dioxide can be involved in the cycle more. Also, through the use of peatlands, which help to store carbon. Next slide. And that brings the end to my part of the presentation. I'll hand you over to Julia.
To conclude everything that was just presenting, basically the carbon cycle is a biogeochemical cycle which is important because all living things are made up of carbon. Now we learned that the cycle consists of several steps which aids it to function properly. Now additionally, human as well as the environment activities can affect the way in which the carbon cycle works. For example, deforestation. Now, there are ways by which humans can help reduce these negative effects, for example, reforestation. Now, if we do not maintain the carbon cycle, life on Earth as we know it would be in danger. Here is a list of our references. Thank you.